Now, moving away from Kenya, the Democratic Alliance has welcomed the ruling by the Supreme Court of Appeal that the automatic loss of South African citizenship after gaining citizenship of another country is unconstitutional. The ruling comes after South Africa's opposition party, the Democratic Alliance, filed an application on behalf of South African citizens who discovered that they had lost their citizenship through legislation.
The application was initially dismissed by the Pretoria High Court before being granted leave to appeal to the Supreme Court of Appeal, with the Minister of Home Affairs opposing the application. However, the Supreme Court ruled that it is constitutionally invalid and irrational to lose South African citizenship when acquiring other citizenships. Joining us now to discuss this further is the Member of Parliament for the Democratic Alliance, Adrian Roos. Good morning, Adrian. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
All right, let's talk about the judgment of the Supreme Court of Appeal. Was the judgment of the Supreme Court of Appeal a victory for the DA as well as South Africans living abroad?
Well, I think, of course, because we stand for the values of freedom and fairness and opportunity. And so it's a victory for us as much as every South African that participated and that was affected by this judgment.
All right, and let's also go back. I want us to go back and understand exactly what this whole thing, where this all started from. South Africans, somehow found out that when they get citizenship with another country, they automatically lose their South African citizenship. Is that it? And, what is the foundation of the DA's work to ensure that this was overturned?
Okay, so what happened is in 2014, before our national elections, then we had persons coming up to us and say that they couldn't register to vote because they had been told they'd lost their citizenship. And this is when we started to really take it up. And, we found there was a bit of legislation that had actually been carried over from the apartheid days in the Citizenship Act. And what the intention of that law was anti-apartheid activists and that had either gone into exile or gone to neighboring Bantustans. The purpose of that law, to all intents and purposes, was to strip them of their citizenship without knowing about it. And essentially what the law said was that if you acquire the citizenship of a second country without getting the permission of the Minister of Home Affairs to retain your South African citizenship, then you automatically lose it. And we had a situation where people were traveling backwards and forwards for up to 7 years before the government even realized that they'd lost their citizenship. And so what the Democratic Alliance argued is that this is irrational because there's other areas of the law which allow you to renounce your citizenship if you wish to do so. And the government has said that it doesn't have a problem with dual nationality. And so really, in our law, you cannot have two different provisions in an act that perform the same task. And so, this section 6(1)(a) essentially was stripping citizens of their citizenship without them knowing about it. And, it took 9 years of activism by a variety of persons and civil society, the Democratic Alliance as well, and 5 years in court to get to this point.
So does this now mean that, now that the Supreme Court has ruled on this matter, those who were unconstitutionally stripped of their citizenship can now get it back, or is there a process that they need to go through?
So there's a process in South Africa. Any provision that is ruled unconstitutional, it needs to be ratified by the Constitutional Court, and then the opponents, they have 15 working days to appeal. Although the Minister of Home Affairs has indicated that they will accept this judgment, so we don't expect that. And so it's really a matter of the Constitutional Court now ratifying that judgment. And then there would be a process put in place. The court judgment said that those that lost their citizenship would automatically get it back. So they wouldn't have to apply for it again. It would more be a case of how do they apply for their passports and ID documents and going forward.
Is there an idea of what numbers we're looking at here with the South Africans living in diaspora? And might this really also be geared towards improving the number of South Africans living in diaspora that can vote in next year's elections? What would you say about those insinuations that this is really just ways that the DA is trying to increase those South Africans who can vote from outside South Africa, or well, those living in diaspora who would like to vote?
Yeah, so look, we had over 10,000 persons that responded to the survey that was run with the grateful thanks of SA people. And the issue really is that persons approached us and said they couldn't register to vote. So the ability to vote and your citizenship, it's a right like any other. And so there's no reason why the Democratic Alliance shouldn't fight for the protection of that right. We didn't fight for the right to vote. We fought for the right to citizenship. And anybody involved, they're not forced to vote for us. There's no way that we can say, well, we did it so that persons will vote for us.
Yeah.
I think you have to the opposite question. I look at the other side of the coin. In that, why did the African National Congress fight this so hard? It was clearly unjust. Then there's also other cases where there was a Chesuse matter in 2020 where they tried to strip the citizenship of South African children that were born of one foreign parent and one South African parent overseas. And so I think you rather need to ask, why would the ANC fight an apartheid-era piece of legislation that should not exist in our law if they're not worried about losing the election? So it's them that have said that. The Democratic Alliance fights for all sorts of rights every single day, and this citizenship is an absolutely fundamental right.
Absolutely, but you are of course not shocked, that there are insinuations that this is geared towards the elections. But I'm sure everyone would also agree that it is a right for every citizen of South Africa to, of course, have these have their passport and, of course, citizenship not taken away from them. What do you think happens next? And I've also seen a few comments of people who say that they, have emigrated out of South Africa. They have a citizenship in another country, but they're not looking forward to getting their South African citizenship back because they're never coming back. What would you say to people like that?
Yeah, so the law doesn't allow those persons to renounce their citizenship. So once the Constitutional Court ratifies the judgment, then all of those issues will be resolved with the Department of Home Affairs and the affected persons. But I think what this shows is that the diaspora, the South African diaspora, they have a role to play in our politics and in issues that affect them. And one never knows, the elections next year are going to be very tight, and there's a very strong possibility of a Democratic Alliance-led government coming in South Africa. And persons might then decide that they want to come back. Their children might decide that they want to be South African and they want to live here. And so we encourage persons to really carefully reconsider if they want to let go of their South African citizenship. One of the big issues was the long amount of time it takes to renew passports, and that made it so difficult for persons that they wanted to get rid of that bureaucratic backlog.
Right.
And we had a petition in Parliament last week. It was at the same time as this case, on exactly the same day, about this issue. And we're really pushing the government. They're going to be opening more centers overseas to be able to apply for your renewals electronically. The waiting times are going to go down from what is currently 18 to 24 months, and we're assured down to 3 months. And so, we really encourage persons to hold on to their South African citizenship if at all possible. At the end of the day, if you have your citizenship, you always have a bit of South Africa in you.
Right.
You never know what will happen in the future.
I mean, there's so much to talk about in this regard. I mean, you've said that there are chances that South Africa might have a DA-led administration. It's going to be a really toughly fought battle, but the ANC has come heavily criticized. Well, we certainly congratulate the DA for this and the people of South Africa for being able to obtain this judgment. I'll bring more stories from there. We look forward to seeing more positive news from there. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.